Hello everyone, welcome to another edition of Cybersecurity Weekly. I'm Fred Cobb, I'm your host. I'm the Vice President of Services and the Chief Information Security Officer here at Infosystems in Chattanooga. And to my right, Mr. Josh Davis, Vice President of Marketing, also at Infosystems. Welcome, Josh.
Hey, good morning, Fred.
Good morning. Thank you for joining me on today's discussion. I think it's going to be a pretty interesting topic, at least it is for me, but I always get passionate about cybersecurity topics. So
I'm glad to be here. I think eventually the audience is going to demand that you bring in someone with more of a cybersecurity acumen than me. But I'm just here to maybe bounce some ideas off of you and occasionally translate for the non-IT listeners out there.
No, it's always great to have you. You always ask some good questions and provide good comment. And to Josh's point, we are going to have some special guests coming up in future episodes, but today you've got myself and Josh. So what we're going to be talking about today is something I always enjoy doing, and it's something that a lot of companies need to be doing. In some cases, it's mandated, like in the payment card industry. If you're a retail merchant and you take credit cards for payment, and depending on the number of transactions, credit card transactions that you do per year, it's mandated that you go through and have a good disaster recovery plan or business continuity plan or incident response plan. Same thing with in the healthcare space. Mm-hmm. If you have a good disaster recovery incident response plan, business continuity plan, you have to write those. You have to have policies and procedures that support those plans, but you also have to test them. That's one of my most fun things to do when I'm working with customers, is going in and doing simulated attacks.
Oh yeah.
Because it can certainly uncover some areas that you need to improve on, or it can tell you, hey, we're ready. If the actual attack occurs, we are spot on, ready to deal with it. So
I'm sure that's when the blood pressure of the customer goes up a little bit when they know the team's coming in to do some simulated attacks and they're on the spot.
Yes, it is, and it's good to have a few people in the know. I mean, obviously, it's kind of difficult to go into a simulated attack without having some people in the know inside the company. Otherwise, panic might set in, and we don't want that to happen. But it's good, as part of an incident response plan or a disaster recovery plan, it's very important to have a identified team within that plan. So if you got your incident response team, it's made up of a few key members. Your disaster recovery team made up of a few key members of the organization that are responsible for things like communication, internal communication to the public, getting systems back up and going, kicking in alternate plans that you have to use in case of a disaster, in case of a cyber incident that's taking a portion or all of your company down. So a little bit about the simulations. So what we do is hopefully a company's got a plan. If not, we can help to create a customized incident response plan or disaster recovery plan. We come in and we learn about the business. We create the plan. We create all the information regarding the team, the disaster recovery team or the incident response team. And then after it's all said and done, it's reviewed, it gets buy-off, it becomes part of the policy and procedure documentation. So you've got that plan. So let's test that plan. So typically what you want to do is you come in with a mock scenario, and it's good to have these anywhere from 2 to 4 hours. You don't really need to extend beyond, say, half a day to get a good test of the plan. But take the case of incident response. Let's say we're going to come in and simulate a ransomware attack that's happening in your environment. Well, there's ways to just talk about it, and there's ways to actually use a technology like KnowBe4, where you can simulate. I think currently KnowBe4 has 15, 16 different common ransomware attacks you can simulate to see if your company is vulnerable to those types of attacks. But so you could use those tools in conjunction with an actual facilitated tabletop exercise. These are commonly referred to as tabletop exercises because, think about it, you get all the incident response team members around or disaster recovery team members around the table, and you present the scenario.
We'll be back with the Cybersecurity Weekly podcast after we pause for this special message. Security analysts believe cyber attacks will continue to escalate throughout 2020 and are recommending that every company, regardless of industry or size, place immediate focus on cybersecurity training and tools that will protect you from these attacks. Did you know that you can book a cybersecurity assessment right now with Fred Cobb's team of cybersecurity engineers at Infosystems? They will help you discover exactly where you are most vulnerable to a cyber attack and make recommendations on how to strengthen your defense in those areas. This is urgent. It's an issue that affects everyone in our community. Visit the Infosystems website at www.infosystems.biz to request your cybersecurity assessment. Now back to the podcast.
Let's say, just as an example, 8:45 this morning, someone from the help desk reports that a user out on the floor says they can't get access to their files anymore. They're getting an access denied or they're unreadable. And let's start it, and we're using the ransomware scenario just to play this out. So all of a sudden, a flood of calls start coming in from the user base to the help desk saying, this is happening, this is happening, this is happening. Okay, what are you going to do? What's step one? Okay, and of course, sometimes you get these glazed over looks, well, I don't know what we're going to do.
Yeah.
Okay, you should have in the incident response plan some common threat scenarios already played out. If we suspect we're under a ransomware attack, what you want to do is quickly identify what's happening, quickly do some containment, whether it's disconnecting from the network, shutting systems down. You start playing these out, and then what you want to do is have injects. Okay, so let's say you've got a good incident response plan, you're doing good backups, you think. So we are going around the table. The system administrator says, well, it wasn't reported until this morning. I took a good backup at midnight the night before. I'm going to revert to backup. My inject as a facilitator might be, okay, you go load the backup tapes, or you go get the backup media, whether it's disk to disk, what have you, and your backups are not good. You hadn't been testing the quality of your backups. What do you do?
Yeah.
Okay, so you put that scenario in front of the group, and you have to have buy-in from the group, because you want them to sort of play the role and act it out as if it was really happening. And that makes for the best type of simulated attack, because you uncover, okay, in this particular situation, they do backups nightly, they do full backups weekly, they do differentials nightly. So they go back in time till they find a good backup. Okay, the recovery point wasn't midnight the night prior, it was 3 weeks ago.
Wow. Yeah.
As an example. Okay, so you've got data doesn't exist for the past 3 weeks, or stale data that's 3 weeks old that you're restoring. What do you do? So you start playing through that scenario, and it's really an educational experience, because you're teaching that particular company and that incident response team to think about things that might come up in real life. Don't think about you've always got good backups because your backups are running nightly. You need to be testing the fidelity of those backups by doing trial restores occasionally to make sure that they work.
Yeah.
So you set the primary scenario, you do the injects, and then at the end of it, we have sort of a tie-out meeting. What were lessons learned? Where could we have done better? Where are some of the holes in the incident response plan we need to go back and edit? What are some things where we just were not prepared? And so you take all that, and that grows your knowledge around editing the incident response plan, making those adjustments, getting the edited information out to the people that need to know about it, and you're much better served if the next day a real life event were to happen.
So I'm curious, when you do these types of exercises, are they using their documented procedures? Do they have that in front of them, or is this something where they're just kind of live, shooting from the hip, from memory of what their procedures are? How does that happen?
And so we uncover, when we set up these testing scenarios, we uncover whether or not they've got good documentation.
Yeah.
I've gone into these events where we're in the process of writing our incident response plan, but we still want to conduct this test because it's going to give us insight into what we need to put in there.
Mm-hmm.
Or, I'm blowing the dust off the incident response plan that I wrote in 2011. And we're going to use that as a basis for the test. So that quickly uncovers they've got dated information.
Yeah.
You can pretty much have a field day as a facilitator in that situation
Yeah.
to tear them up pretty good, in a nice way, of course.
Yeah.
But
And of course, none of this is intended to, embarrass or anything like that.
No.
You're really providing a valuable service when you do those types of exercises.
yeah, you have to be a good reader of people's faces and their body posture and their tone, because you're going to get people in there, particularly if here's the director of engineering over here and director of administration, and here's the person on the other side of the table that is responsible for keeping up that plan or doing the good backups, testing the backups, and all of a sudden you're presenting a scenario where what he's doing may be called into question.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to be very careful
Yeah.
when you're doing those, and make sure that you're, even though you may be uncovering ugly things about, ugly things about the environment, you need to always spin it in a positive light as that
Yeah.
facilitator, because no one has come out of any of these that I've ever attended without learning something about their environment, something that they could take back, put in the plan, put into company newsletters, things of that nature that's going to help them down the road.
Yeah, and that's something I've heard about, not only our tabletop exercises that we've gone and done, but when we're doing cybersecurity assessments for customers too. The feedback that I've heard not only internally from our sales team, from the cybersecurity engineers, but also from some of the customers, is they walked away with information that was just crucial. Like, there's not a single instance where the customer didn't gain value out of that, walk away with new information or helpful information.
No, that's a great point. Just 2 weeks ago, I was talking to a customer, ended up taking us up on one of our security impact reviews.
Mm-hmm.
And they were savvy, they were very technical, pardon me, they knew what they were doing. And they said, "You're not going to tell me anything I don't already know." I said, "Okay, well, in my mind, I'm like, we'll take that on as a challenge, but
Yeah.
I understand where you're coming from. You know a lot about your business, you understand the industry, you're a cyber professional, you're a systems engineer, all those things. So you should have a pretty good understanding of what's going on." Well, we come in, we do the security impact review, and yes, we did uncover some things. Not only did we uncover things that were unknown, but the things that this individual already knew about. We gave them good insight into in a couple of cases, very cost-effective ways to fix the issues that they had in hand without having to go off and ask for a lot of capital or operating additional monies to take care of that, because they had the tools natively. They just weren't properly using them.
Yeah, great information. So when it comes to performing tabletop exercises, I know, like you said, some companies are required because of their industry regulations to do these ever so often, but what about other companies? How often do they need to do these types of exercises? Do you have recommendations?
Yeah, I think you don't want to go too overboard with the facilitated type testing. I think once a year at least, maybe twice a year on the facilitated exercises. Now, as far as some of the other simulated type of attacks, something like a simulated phish email. Maybe you're subscribing to KnowBe4. That's a product that we recommend highly. We do a lot of installs for. We manage phishing campaigns for a lot of customers. Things like that that are more frequent that you might encounter those.
Yeah.
You probably want to test in some cases quarterly. It's too predictable after a while if you do phishing tests or phishing simulations on a monthly basis.
Yeah.
But kind of mixing it up, targeting a group of individuals in the environment, going after the executives in the environment maybe once a quarter with simulated phishing attacks, keeping them on their toes.
Yeah.
Those types of simulated attacks could be done a little bit more frequently than the tabletop exercises.
Yeah.
But all of these go into making your environment better, keeping you more aware of what's happening, ways you can shore up vulnerabilities in your environment that might be easily fixed once the awareness is raised that these vulnerabilities exist.
Yeah, that's great. And for people out there who are going through these types of exercises, how hard is it to implement or make changes afterwards? Do they have to go back to the drawing board, or are there very easy tweaks? What do you typically see coming out of these types of events?
In a lot of cases, it's very subtle things that you can do, very cost-effective, sometimes zero cost, things that you can do to really make a huge impact. it's very rare that you would come in and do a tabletop exercise and say, oh, you got a problem here. It's going to require this huge expenditure to fix it. Most of the time, it's incremental things you can be doing. It's maybe updating the policies and procedures, updating the actual plan, doing some training around phishing, make sure you're doing your restore testing. You're doing your backups, make sure you're testing to make sure that those backups can be used to restore. So none of that is really very time consuming. Certainly doesn't cost a lot of money, if any money. So it's just a very good way to provide education and to come away from it as a business owner feeling like, yeah, I see where my gaps are. And if something were to happen, I'm not prepared today, but I'm making those changes to make myself prepared. Or I appreciate the test. You showed me that I'm very prepared for some of the more common cyber incidents that we may encounter.
That's great. You know, my request would be you got to bring me in and let me observe one of these because it sounds really cool.
Sure will. Yeah, they're very fun, particularly if you get that the overall buy-in from everybody around the table.
Yeah.
It's really good to see the people play off each other and get into the role playing that needs to happen to make it really a success story.
Yeah.
So I think that's all I've got for today around simulated attacks. Please tune in again. We're going to be talking about, I think next off, we're going to be talking about, among other things, patching, why it's needed, who needs it, why do you need to do it again, and it's a very important part of cybersecurity. So that'll be coming up in our very next episode after this one. Thanks again for tuning in. Goodbye.